Hi and welcome to the Healthy Home module. In this one we're going to be breaking down the design elements of creating a healthy home. We're going to be first looking at the design considerations of creating a passive solar design house. Look at some of the ideas around the creation of tiny houses and to bring back the footprint and the necessity of owning lots of things in a big house and just trying reducing resources by incorporating that into a tiny house. And then we'll be looking at different types of building materials using natural building materials. So the overall picture that I'm aiming to set out with this module is to get a concept of how you can design a house that works well with the natural seasons and the site characteristics to store heat within the house and to get maximum solar access, and then to try to reduce the footprint and the size of the house through incorporating tiny house ideas into its design, and then looking at what kind of building materials are most appropriate to that particular region and can be best resourced sustainably within that region and will perform most efficiently within the various climatic conditions that your particular site has. So we'll aim to kind of weave all of that together into an idea of how you can create a nice, healthy, permaculture themed home. So with design of a passive solar house, what we're trying to do is make best use of the sunlight that a house receives and design it in a way that is compatible with the particular climate of a site. So a house in a cold region, for example, the design considerations are going to be very themed on heavy insulation to avoid heat loss and to get maximum solar access during the winter months in particular, when that sun getting into the house is going to be able to be stored if it can strike nice heavy earth type materials, and then that heat can then be stored and insulated within the house by incorporating appropriate design. But it could be very different. If it's a hot, humid type climate, you'd want to be able to make sure there's good airflow through the house, and you'd want good materials that don't store heat and allow good ventilation airflow through the building. So you've always got to be considerate of the particular characteristics of your site. So for this module I'm going to focus in particular on the design characteristics of a New Zealand type house. Obviously there's lots of different contexts in which you could focus on, but to make it most applicable to New Zealand conditions, that's the model I'll work with. So in a New Zealand situation, you've got quite intense bright sunlight during the summer months that can overheat a house. So you want a design where there's going to be good eave coverage to block the midday in particular sun coming in at summer. But in winter you want to be able to let in as much light as possible. So you want to have good north-facing window space to be able to let that light into the building, and then preferably store the heat within that light by absorbing it in solid earth type materials, whether it be concrete or brick or earth type materials within that house. And as the sun hits those materials, they'll heat up and then slowly re-radiate that heat during the night when it's cold, and therefore reduce your heating requirement for that building. And also in the cold regions of New Zealand in particular, you want to make sure that it's well insulated to prevent the loss of heat from that building. So the general design to meet those requirements is having a lot of glass on your north facing side of your building to let that light in, having some good solid materials to absorb that heat in your foundation or the floor of your building, and on the south back face of your building, so that as the sun comes in, it will strike those heavy materials that will absorb that heat and then re-radiate it again. So this is your big window facing north. Then also making sure that there's good insulation in the floor. A lot of the heat in a building can be lost through the ground, as the heat can be transferred through conduction. As solid materials meet each other, they can pass through those solid materials quite easily. So it's important to insulate the foundation quite well. And there's different ways to do that. Some of the more natural materials can be using wool. So if you have got an earth type floor, you can have your your earth floor, a layer of wool, another layer of earth, particularly high in clay, and then your foundations with gravel, and having your foundation blocks for earthquake proofing on just the corners of your house to make sure to allow you to incorporate an earthen floor into your house. Or, as is more commonly done in New Zealand, you can have a concrete pad, and that can act as the foundation to the building as well. And to increase the thermal insulation of that, you can incorporate some polythene layer underneath the concrete slab, and that will prevent the heat loss from the concrete slab into the ground. And those materials, you can argue they're not very environmentally sustainable or natural, but when you look at the long-term performance of those materials and their ability to prevent the heat loss from that building site, they to some degree anyway offset the initial cost of their construction and the unsustainability of their energy use in their construction by their long-term good performance. So you may want to incorporate a concrete floor with a bit of insulation beneath it. On the back, the south side of the building, you want to also make sure that that is well insulated. Again, with natural materials, you could do that quite effectively with a straw, using straw bales, which can they block the heat transfer through them. So any materials like wool too, where they have got a lot of airspace in them, the airspace trapped within those building materials prevents the heat loss through those materials. So dense materials like concrete and earth walls do allow heat to transfer them quite easily because they're quite dense materials, but building materials that have got air pockets trapped within them, like straw bales or wool, prevent the heat loss through those materials, so they act as good insulating materials. So particularly on the back side of a earth-type building, people use straw bales to help insulate. And then to get the sunlight, particularly in the middle of winter, back into the back part of the house, there's often eave in the top of the building to let the sunlight reach your back parts of your house. And what you can do with this design is that if you've got a house with 2 bedrooms thick, so you've got maybe your living areas in the front facing north, and then you've got your sleeping bedroom type areas down the back, or your bathrooms or your toilets. By having a roof design with a window up the top, it allows the sunlight to reach back into those living areas further back in your house that wouldn't normally be receiving sunlight, because there's sunlight coming through the front windows would hit the wall in between those 2 spaces. But by leaving the ceiling space open and not having the walls go all the way up to the ceiling, you can get sunlight coming through those windows and getting back into the back of your house, where they can be hitting good thermal mass storage materials such as earth walls or concrete or whatever it might be, so that they can store the heat and re-radiate it, but you're also getting the lighting access into those back bedrooms. So it's quite a handy design for a house to have that roof pitch angle and the windows up here allowing the light access further back into your house. Some of the other considerations with the house is, with this front roof that's facing north, you may want to incorporate some sort of solar panel into there, or even solar hot water heating. And with your other roof spaces, that you can connect them up to the ones facing north, but perhaps the ones that face south and are not being used for solar harvest through a solar panel, you can hook up to capturing rainwater, so that you have an opportunity to create electricity and store water, lessen light, all through your design of your roof space. Some of the other important things for insulation is having double glazed windows, so making sure that the windows particularly with a passive solar design house where there's a lot of north facing window space to let that light in, it's important to have good insulation rating to those windows, and to be able to um, have at least a double glazed window to prevent excessive heat loss through them, but also the roof too, and making sure you pay attention to the insulation of roof spaces, either with natural materials such as wool or even pink bats if need be, but making sure that there isn't an opportunity there for heat to be lost, because what heat will do within a building is to rise, and any of these poorly insulated spaces in the ceiling cavity in particular are going to suck up the heat out of the building quite fast, so you want to be able to insulate them quite well. So double glazing on your windows. You can have water capture in the tanks, solar panels on the north facing windows. And then you've got all of your insulation on the foundation of the house and on your southern and westerly parts of the house. The other ideas with a passive solar design is if you have a look at a plan view to a house, so having the long axis of the house facing north so that you're getting good solar access into the house throughout its long axis, so that most rooms will get the sunlight. You can have that divide through the middle of the houses, which could act as a division between your bedroom and bathroom areas and your living spaces. And by having that half wall separation between them, allowing the sunlight to get back into those bedrooms and bathroom spaces. And then when you're having a look at the location of these, often having your kitchen on the east side of the house, northeast, yep. So that it's going to be getting the early morning sunlight coming into the kitchen, but it's not going to get too hot in the evening when you're cooking your evening meal, because it's not on the west side where the afternoon sunlight is going to be coming into your bedroom, into your living areas. So the west side of the house might be better suited to more of a social and entertaining dining room, living room type spaces. And you can incorporate into those spaces a bit of deck and garden areas, so that you can migrate out into these spaces, and you can have cob ovens, and you can have courtyard spaces and nice kind of garden entertaining areas here. And in association with your kitchen design, having some herb gardens or intensive vegetable production in nice close proximity to your kitchen. So this could be herbs and vegetables, so that there's opportunity straight from your kitchen to access those resources and to be able to bring them easily into your kitchen. And then perhaps on this side of the house is your main access into the house, so that that main access is not interfering with the design of garden spaces and entertainment spaces in your kitchen and living areas. And also you can get more direct access to different parts of your house by having your access come in from one end like that. So some of the other things here is just being conscious of the movement of the sun and how hot the sun is at different times of the day. So as I was referring to before with the kitchen being on the east side, that's going to be nice in the morning because the sun's not going to be too bright and intense and hot at that time, particularly in summer. But as the sun's migrating across the sky and it's getting hotter and the day's getting warmer, you want some sort of shade and protection, particularly in summer, on the western side of the house, and in New Zealand with our northwesterly winds, it will also help protect you against the winds that are coming from a northwesterly direction. And that can be achieved by tying in the design of the house with the surrounding landscaping. So on that west side of your building, having some deciduous tree cover that are going to provide some summer shade to the building during summer, and also block the northwesterly winds that are going to be most prevalent in spring and summer, to provide some afternoon shade to those social areas in there, which is going to cool them down and be more a comfortable space to be in. And then having some dense southerly plantings, and that's going to help in winter, blocking the southerly winds, and by blocking them it's going to reduce the cooling impact of those winds on your house and their impact of sucking heat out of the house by blocking and redirecting the wind that would otherwise be hitting the south side of your house. So generally speaking, you're trying to get good north and east access to the house, so keeping those areas clear of vegetation and trees so that you're getting as much light into your house on those parts of your house. And that they're good places also to locate kitchen gardens that are going to be supplying the kitchen with fresh produce, and having entertainment areas that are going to be protected by your deciduous trees on your west side. Having your plantings on your south side, and that will help redirect and minimise the winds that are coming in on winter and the northwesterly winds that are coming in on summer, and just help stabilise the climate around the house, and therefore reduce the impact of the winds on heating and cooling your house, and to moderate the environment within it. And then within the context of your house, you can start working with north-facing windows and insulating materials to let the light into the house, and then store that heat within the house. One of the things that's gained more popularity recently is to use tiny houses, so to be able to reduce the overall footprint of the house and the resources that you need to set up that house, and therefore the cost saving associated with that. So some of the ideas around that is the reduced time and money associated with a build of that nature, and the reduced time it would take to pay off a mortgage to set it up, and the appeal of that as far as freeing up your own time to pursue your personal interests and to be able to build businesses and set up things that you wouldn't normally do, because you're fixed in a 9-to-5 kind of job, paying off a mortgage for a house that you often need to travel long distances from that house to where you work, and therefore the whole lifestyle changes associated with that. So to be able to move away from kind of being locked into that life, to be able to live in something that is smaller and cheaper to be able to set up and build and pay off a mortgage on, and therefore be less restricted and having more freedom in your work options, and not being restricted to a 9-to-5 type situation and all the travel associated with often getting to those work environments, and maybe working from home and having more leisure time and free time to be able to pursue your personal interests, and how in our day and age with the high mortgage rates and the high cost of living associated with setting up a house, how having a tiny house just frees up many of those lifestyle choices associated with paying off those big houses. Some of the different applications of a tiny house: you could have a tiny house that's on a trailer and gives you that mobile living option, so you don't even have to be affixed to a particular location. You can travel around with that tiny house to different places you want to live at. Also quite good for creating outhouse spaces, so for guests or for woofers, so to be able to provide accommodation for people to work on your farm, or guest housing if you're running a bed and breakfast, or providing even a space for your children to be able to have their own little environment to explore and manage and set up on their own terms. So tiny houses, can fulfill many of these different requirements, even as a bit of a shed in the backyard to be able to explore your creative interests in your own little creative space.
Cool.